What's good, homies little slice? Nature is beautiful. Nature is strong. Nature is powerful. Nature is everywhere. Nature is out to get you. Floods, fires, tornadoes, fire tornadoes, bears, elephants, wolves, elephant wolves. Outside is scary. You live in a world where at any moment you could be struck by lightning, crushed by a tree, swallowed by a sinkhole, or stabbed by your DoorDasher. There are those among us who would assimilate with nature, fanatical activists protecting that which destroys. At this rate, it's only a matter of time before our pristine society, devoid of flaws, crumbles into a perverse dystopia, corrupting your children, defiling your wife, and turning you into a cuck. I, for one, won't stand for this. It's time to don the white tank top of insurgents and take the domestic fight to nature in Monster Hunter World, a game solely dedicated to increasing your environmental footprint. You are an A-list hunter of the Fifth Fleet. After creating your new best friend and briefly meeting the love of your life, you are tragically introduced to your designated waifu, and then the Fire Nation attacked. Escaping with Uggo in tow, you find yourself in the New World, a land teeming with life that yearns to become clothing. After learning essential stealth mechanics that are never used again, you arrive in Astera, the main hub of the game and the perfect place to immediately turn off volumetric rendering. It's here that you'll be given your first mission: kill a sentient volcano. But first, you'll need a weapon. Whether you like smashing, slashing, Bloodborne, or children, this game has a weapon to suit your needs, and the weapon you choose can dramatically change how combat plays out. For example, Sever-type weapons can cut off tails, while bludgeoning weapons can stun monsters and are less prone to bouncing. Now I know what some of you are thinking.
Ranged weapons? I didn't know they made this game for pussies.
But fear not, proud keepers of the gate, as, like you, the range for damage fall-off is incredibly short, and so even ranged players will spend the majority of their time in the heart of the action. Unless you're in multiplayer. It turns out that, impressively, you've managed to lose the walking natural disaster, and so before you fight it, you'll have to find it. This is a notice board. This is a cutting board. Both can be used to depart on a series of quests. Quests will make up the majority of the gameplay loop, sending you to a specific place to do a specific thing. There's a cosmetic timer, and if you die too many times, you fail. There are also expeditions, which, unlike quests, have no timer, no death limit, and a constant cycle of monsters. They also have special side missions, the most notable being your Palicos side mission to assimilate the regional savages, allowing you to draft and throw the lives away of local tribesmen. Each tribe you colonize will unlock a new gadget for your Palico. The tribe will also bestow upon you their highest honor, Ye Old Uber Service. This automated mode of travel allows you to reach your destination while filing your taxes or sharpening your sword.
This will take me a minute.
While on quests, you'll often see monsters you're not expected to kill yet but can choose to do so anyway, the incentive being that stronger monsters make stronger gear. Oftentimes, wearing a monster's entire extended bloodline is not optimal, and instead you'll want to mix and match different armor based on their set bonuses and perks. Perks are not made equal. An attack perk can give you a 1% damage increase, while a defensive perk like Divine Blessing has a random chance to massively reduce the damage you take, which constantly prevents you from dying. Weapons, on the other hand, don't have perks and instead have stats which are never explained, and so players might wonder why a weapon with 600 attack does 10 damage. If you want to know what any of the numbers on your weapon actually mean, you'll have to read this simple 3,000-word breakdown, but as attention spans are in short supply these days, I read it for you. In short, weapons lie on their resume. The most important thing is rarity, as higher tier weapons will typically be the most effective. But outside of rarity, sharpness is king. It's the biggest raw boost to damage in addition to preventing your weapon from bouncing when it otherwise would. Elemental damage is increased or decreased depending on the monster's resistance. The damage is tacked onto your attacks and is unaffected by how hard you swing, meaning that fast elemental weapons will gain more benefit while heavy elemental weapons are complete dogshit. The element slots can also have status effects, which, unlike elements, don't deal raw damage, instead building up an invisible status bar like Bleed in Elden Ring. Poison, Paralyze, and Sleep are self-explanatory, Exhaust makes a monster tired and less aggressive, and no one knows what Blast does because no one picks it. Affinity is Critical Strike Chance. You can have negative Critical Strike Chance, which gives you a mirrored chance to reduce your damage, but the damage multiplier is so low that you can completely ignore it. Elder Seal is cosmetic. Speaking of which, when designing monsters, developers wanted them to feel as natural as possible, and so when deciding on their appearance, behaviors, and fighting style, they would draw inspiration from real life. The Great Jagras, for example, looks and walks like a Komodo dragon. The way it regurgitates to feed its young is more akin to a bird. While swallowing creatures whole, then attacking by rolling its hyper-engorged body at you, is the spitting image of Sonic the Hedgehog 4. The developers even wrote monster fanfiction which can affect how encounters play out. For example, the Rathian and Rathalos are canonically mated, which means if you're fighting one of them and you hear this, you're about to be fighting the other one as well. Monsters are made up of parts. Hit them enough and they break. For the most part, whatever you break will take more damage, but breaking parts can also affect a monster's abilities. For example, Rathians, the worst monster, have a tail flip which inflicts poison. But tail flipping is much more difficult without a tail, which, after being severed, will reduce the range of the attack and remove the poison effect. Upon completing a hunt, you'll gain bonus loot for every part broken, a reward structure which becomes increasingly disturbing the more you think about it. Imagine for a moment that you were a monster, basking in the tranquil forest surroundings. Suddenly, you are attacked by autistic weeaboos and beaten within an inch of your life. Barely escaping alive, you retreat to your nest and collapse from your wounds, only to realize you've led your pursuers right to your door. Too weak to fight back, dread washes over you, knowing that after you're slain, you'll be dissected and repurposed as drip. The only solace that at least you'll be dead soon. "Hold on," yells a troglodyte as he steps forward to look down at your broken form. As his gaze meets yours, you see realization in his eyes. "Don't kill it. I still need to break its arms for my gloves." You'll get even more loot if, instead of granting the sweet release of death, you administer electrotherapy and then pollinate your victim into unconsciousness. The combat itself is both incredibly jank and incredibly satisfying. Weapons are unwieldy, and by extension, so are you. The simple act of holding them will reduce your move speed, some a lot more than others. Most attack animations are very long, and you can't redirect them once they've begun. Oftentimes, you'll see an attack coming seconds in advance and still get hit by it anyway. Then, after a monster has taken enough damage, they'll enter their enraged state. This can happen several times throughout a fight, and in addition to making a monster more aggressive, it can also affect their moveset. The meth bird, for example, will dig up a rock. This not only serves as both melee and ranged weapon, but also causes your frontal attacks to bounce off, meaning you'll need to be more mindful of how you approach. Not all enraged phases are this transformative. For example, Rathians, the worst monster, will turn their entire body into a hitbox and then run back and forth. The satisfaction comes from stringing together tools and combos to meticulously dismantle a monster that has been giving you shit for 10 straight minutes, starting by getting them on the ground. Hit a monster enough and they stagger, hit them even more and they fall prone. You also can prone a monster with flash pods, the environment, other monsters, or even mounts.
28 samples.
Mounts are an additional status. Hitting a monster while falling will deal mount damage, building an invisible status bar. The attack that fills the bar will initiate the mounting minigame, during which you frantically stab the shit out of the monster while it fights for dear life. After enough stabbing, a final heavy attack will prone the monster. This is particularly useful for getting an enraged monster grounded, but requires more damage to initiate the more times you use it. The final means of downing a monster was introduced with the Iceborne expansion. This is the clutch claw. It can be used to make parts take increased damage, while this is called a flint shot and is used to forcibly rearrange the vertebrae in a monster's neck. Flint shots can only be used when attached to a non-enraged monster's head. You can also slap a monster to rotate it, but after catching 3 hands, the monster enrages and the flint shot won't work. Monsters will also typically enrage after recovering, but if you manage to down a monster with minimal rotation, there's a good chance they won't and you can immediately do it again. This game is immersive. There's immense detail in even the most mundane activities. For example, eating has a cutscene, and that cutscene has about 20 variations in spite of the fact that you probably skipped all of them. Monsters interact with their environment and have daily routines. They wander the same areas, hunt the same food, and contemplate existence by the same bodies of water. If you watch them long enough, you begin to wonder, is this wrong? Is violence really the only way? Maybe there is a world where we could coexist in harmony, a concept which immediately falls apart when this sentient flashbang inserts itself into your life, blinds you, and leaves. Another immersive decision was having your consumables literally grow on trees, which also solves the age-old problem with RPGs wherein you finish a game with every consumable you ever found safely gathering dust in your inventory in case you desperately need them for the sequel. If you run out of a consumable, you can walk 10 feet in any direction to find more or even grow your own. Need more flash pods? Flashpod plantation. Want more ammunition? American wet dream. No honey? No problem. Around 30 hours into the game, you'll defeat the volcano dragon, ending the tutorial. New monsters are added, old ones are made stronger, and the only character worth caring about is finally introduced. A new region is unlocked, and you'll now have to defeat the 4 elements personified, at which point it becomes abundantly clear that flashpods are canonically the most powerful entity in the universe, as every single time this carcinogen concentrate would take to the air, flashpods would bring it back down, completely deleting aerial mechanics in addition to providing free damage. After facing off against the base game's final boss, you'll unlock the post-game, at which point you can finally skip the game's best content and jump straight into Iceborne. Iceborne is the biggest expansion I've seen for a single-player game. With it comes new monsters, stronger versions of old monsters, new gear, stronger versions of old gear, a new region, stronger versions of old regions, a new hub to remind you how many friends you don't have, and a 2.5 times coziness multiplier, making this the most wholesome animal abuse simulator I've ever played. But the greatest feature? Promiscuity. By the time Iceborne released, players had spent a long time gazing at the handler next door, nurturing a deep-seated disdain for the fictional waifu they had been assigned. So in Iceborne, you cheat on them. Finally, you can enjoy missions, food, conversation, and pollution with your one true love. Then, after growing accustomed to greener pastures, Capcom takes her away once again, establishing that not only can they hurt you, but they will without hesitation. Also with Iceborne came an improved player housing system, a place you can customize to your liking and use to store your kidnapped companions. There's no functional purpose for the housing, but you can use it to feed your fish, float in the hot spring, or even invite other players over to roleplay as functional adults who can afford to live in a one-room studio apartment. And now that you're here and comfortable and vulnerable, it's time to talk about the microtransactions. This game has hundreds of dollars in paid DLC. Whereas it only affects minor things like emotes, the housing system, and the handler's clothing, it also incentivizes developers to remove cosmetic and quality of life features so that they can be sold back to you. A prime example being if you look back at another Capcom game, Dragon's Dogma. Just by playing Dragon's Dogma, you can unlock the ability to recustomize your character and your companion as many times as you want with no restrictions. Fast forward and the same developers are charging $3 each for character recustomizations. Companion customization sold separately. You can also purchase the 2-voucher bundle, which will run you 5 cents more than if you had bought them separately. There are also several customization options locked exclusively behind a paywall. I'll admit, outside of the Demon Go handler skin, there are no mandatory microtransactions, but I ask you to consider that just maybe furniture and handler outfits crawled so that New Game Plus as paid Day 1 DLC could run. After beating Iceborne's story, you'll unlock the new post-game, and this is where Iceborne's changes to the flow of combat become most apparent. Capcom, irritated by having literally every air-based mechanic in the game voided by insects, decided it would be more fun if monsters were almost completely immune to flash pods, and you had to spend 90 seconds chasing their tails while you waited for them to land. It doesn't help that the Clutch Claw has gone from a neat bonus to the focus of combat design. As a result, monster health was more than tripled. Ironically, the moment the game starts being designed with the Clutch Claw in mind is the same moment the Clutch Claw becomes infinitely more irritating to use. Now, monsters would input read when you used it and immediately use attacks to throw you off. Monsters are also enraged more frequently, giving you fewer chances to even use the flint shot. In fact, some monsters, such as Oralis Hemorrhoidus, whose sole purpose is to emasculate smaller monsters, are near permanently enraged. The combination of increased health, fewer windows to attack, and fewer flint shots meant that monsters were spending a lot less time on the ground. As a result, average kill times have gone from 5 to 10 minutes to 15 to 30. Fortunately, there's new monsters to fight. Unfortunately, one of them is the Rajang. This all-natural Homo sapien lost me my first quest. It's small, fast, hyper-aggressive, punishes most attacks, and at any time can do this. I can't dodge this with my weapon drawn. Cool. On top of the standard enrage, the Rajang has a rampaging state, during which it hardens its arms so that frontal attacks will bounce off. To end the rampaging state, you need to attack its tail. This is a furious Rajang. It doesn't have a tail. Aim for its head. Yeah, what a great idea. This was a terrible idea. This war crime of a monster can be forgiven, however, as you also get to fight the raging Brachydios, who in its final moments will beseech the aid of Miyazaki, transforming into a literal Dark Souls boss. You get the idea. The post-game also features the Dragon, Safi Jiva, a boss fight which takes place over several lobbies at once, with better rewards the more you contribute in Parts Broken. It's an extremely enjoyable cooperative experience, and I highly recommend doing it in multiplayer, as grinding is always better with a friend. But then there's the final boss, Fatalis. This fight has one of the coolest moments in any game. Unfortunately, the fight is also bullshit from start to finish. You get extra feints because you're expected to die. You also get the only AI companion in the entire game who will assist you until you beat the first phase, after which he will never assist you in the first phase ever again. This fight has deceptive animations. Oh look, Fatalis is breathing fire. What a dangerous place to stand. I'm going to stand on the other side, except no. Fatalis, with comical speed, throws his head to the other side, instantly killing me. An attack animation which is only revealed in the final phase of the fight you spent 20 minutes reaching. Oh look, Fatalis just ran into a wall. Obviously, he's going to stop moving and turn around now, right? Wrong. He detected that I was next to his foot, and, as his entire body is a hitbox, continued running into the wall. Seamless and natural monster behavior. Oh look, fire, I should avoid that, is awkwardly pushed back into the flames by the immersive and incredibly well-designed boss, attempts to roll away from the follow-up attack only to slide off the slight change in elevation that the game lets you walk up, resulting in death by a knee hitting the ground behind me. This fight takes everything you've learned about the game up to this point and throws it out the window. Flash pods? Useless. Flint shot? No effect if he's upright, and if he's on all fours, it doesn't prone him like it does every other monster in the game. The enormous health pool and intentionally short quest timer incentivize you to use the Clutch Claw's Soften Hide attack, which the fight of course punishes you for using. Fatalis input reads the attack and responds by doing this. The fun thing about this attack is that even if you live, there's a random chance that he'll use a follow-up attack to kill you anyway, effectively turning the Clutch Claw into insta-kill roulette. This is zero-sum discharge. It's incredibly fun to use and is also my strongest attack. It has the same risks as the Clutch Claw in that I can be thrown off at any time during the animation, but with careful timing, it can be executed safely. Fatalis, however, would just punish the recovery animation, meaning that I'd need to relearn about 150 hours of muscle memory to cancel the final, most enjoyable part of the attack. This felt gamey, but not nearly as gamey as the actual meta strategies for fighting Fatalis. These are smoke bombs. They're used to temporarily hide from monsters. Up until Fatalis, I'd never used or even crafted one. But a common strategy for killing Fatalis is to abuse the animation lock whenever a monster loses sight of you, an exploit which isn't even consistent. This fight is less like an epic encounter against a dragon and more like you're trying to out-cringe the developers. It highlights everything wrong with the combat and actively prevents you from using half the tools given to you. Back in the game. I want to hang myself from a tree. Co-op makes it less terrible, and I highly recommend that's what you do. It's worth noting that while this fight did sour the end of my playthrough, it is the exception and not the rule. And so to summarize the game, Monster Hunter World is a cozy and deeply immersive action RPG. The combat, while slow and jank, still manages to be immensely enjoyable outside of very specific garbage encounters. There's a completely insane amount of content, much of which I didn't even touch on, and if you don't like banging your head against a wall by yourself, the co-op is some of the most enjoyable in any game. If the idea of wearing monsters appeals to you, if you're a fan of action RPGs, or even if you just saw the trailer for Monster Hunter Wilds and were hoping to dip your toe into the franchise, this game is worth your time. The game is $30, but I've seen it go as low as $10. Either way, you'll get your money's worth. Thank you for watching, more videos to come probably, and have a pleasant immediate existence.